Okay, I'll officially get started by just welcoming all of you guys. Sawadee Kap, welcome. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Nice that you guys decided to join for class today. This is our group learning program, and we study the teachings of the Buddha in order to help you get to the enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful and joyful permanently, no longer experiencing anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other discontent feelings. The way that we start our class is we start with meditation in order to help you learn meditation and practice meditation. And then afterwards, I'll transition into sharing teachings with you that are going to help you to get to enlightenment. Because you can't just meditate your way to enlightenment. You need other teachings besides just meditation in order to get to the enlightened mental state where the mind can be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy permanently. So once again, I'd like to welcome you guys and welcome those of you guys online that are joining us for our class. If you would like to take a position either seated, on the floor, in a chair, whatever's comfortable for you, there's actually 4 positions to meditate in. There's seated, lying, standing, and walking. And typically people are learning in the seated position. And if you're sitting on the floor, you might have some cushions under your rear. Some people like to have multiple cushions in order to get their hips up in the air. This lessens the angle at the hips, the knees, and the ankles, and it helps the circulation to flow. If you're in a chair, you might just sit with your feet flat on the floor or cross at the ankles. It's really up to you, whatever's comfortable. There's not a right or wrong way. It's whatever's comfortable for your body. And everybody's body is a little bit different. So you're going to find that different things are comfortable at different times, and you can adjust your body position as you like. The hands and the arms should also be relaxed and comfortable. The Buddha put his right hand over his left with his thumbs together, and he put this into his lap. So if this is comfortable for you, you could use this, but there's other options as well. Some people like to put their palms on their thighs or their knees. Some people put their palms up. It's really up to you. The lower body and the hands and arms should be completely relaxed. The upper body should be erect. This keeps the mind attentive and alert during the meditation. Whereas if you were slouched, the mind would have a tendency to be complacent or sluggish. Or if you were real rigid, the mind would have a tendency to be overactive or uptight. So you would like the upper body to be erect, which keeps the mind attentive and alert so you can actively train the mind during the meditation. Because this is a dedicated, active, purposeful training session where you're eliminating certain unwholesome qualities from the mind and you're arising certain wholesome qualities in the mind. I'm going to ease into meditation with some chanting, which you guys are welcome to join if you like. The chanting that we do is on a 1-page sheet over there on the table. There's a laminated sheet. You're welcome to get those if you like. You can see the original words that we use to chant because we chant in the Pali language. And then it has the English translations underneath of it as well. What you'll notice is that these chants are actually paying a lot of respect to the Buddha, a lot of gratitude to the Buddha. I don't suspect that the Buddha actually taught these chants. I suspect that his students, either during his life or after his death, actually produced these chants and created these chants. Because as you see, there's a lot of gratitude and respect that's given to the Buddha. And a Buddha has eliminated their ego. An enlightened being has eliminated their ego. They don't walk around boastful and arrogant, teaching people to bow down to them and chant these kind of chants to them or anything like that. So I suspect his students created these after his death or maybe during his life as a way to honor and respect him. Because if you learned from a teacher that helped you go from anger and sadness and frustration and other discontent feelings, and then they helped you to be able to get to this peaceful and joyful mental state, you would have a lot of appreciation and gratitude for that person. And the Buddha didn't ask for anything from his students. He didn't ask for compensation. He didn't have any expectations of anything from his students. He just helped them to be able to get to this enlightened mental state. So we use these chants nowadays to ease the mind into meditation and out of meditation. During the lifetime of the Buddha, they used chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory because everything he taught was oral. So they used chanting as a way to remember the teachings. Every 2 weeks, they would recite his teachings word for word as a way to remember them and commit them to memory. Today, we don't need to chant in order to commit the teachings to memory. We have books, videos, podcasts, things like this, but we still chant as a way to ease the mind into meditation. So if you'd like to chant along, you're welcome to chant along. I'll be chanting those to ease us into meditation. Then once we get into meditation, I'll provide you some guidance and some instructions instruction on the meditation itself, how to actually do it. Then when we come out of then after the instruction, there'll be a period of time of quiet where we'll just be meditating. Of course, you're going to hear the occasional car or maybe a bird or something like this, but all these sounds are impermanent. You can just train the mind to let it go and come back to the breath as I teach you in the guidance of the meditation. So during that period of time where we're just meditating, I won't be talking. It'll just be us meditating here at the temple. And those of you that are joining us online, you can just meditate right along together. Then we'll come out of the meditation with some more chanting as a way to ease the mind out of meditation. And then from there, I'll open up to questions that you guys might have about meditation in order to help you develop your meditation practice before we transition into sharing the teachings that we have today, which is part of this book series, the Volume 1, which is titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. We're going to be studying Chapter 7 today, which is titled The Five Precepts, A Householder's Guide to Daily Practice. These are 5 impactful decisions that you can make that are going to either be wise decisions that lead to wholesome results in your life or unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. So if you gain the wisdom of these 5 precepts, you can make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. And lacking this wisdom, you will naturally make unwise decisions that produce unwholesome results in your life. So these 5 precepts will really help you to be able to increase your wisdom of the natural laws of existence, which is what the Buddha taught. So if you'd like to join for meditation, make yourself comfortable. If you need a chair or you need a cushion or anything like this, feel free to make yourself comfortable. Remember, your lower body and hands and arms can be nice and comfortable, and you're welcome to join along in the chants as well. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sammuno Sakato Rokawito Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body and hands and arms comfortable, and the upper body erect, just close the eyes and start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath, a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath, not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose. And when you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to your next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then, whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath, either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Just whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. You have nowhere to go. There's nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. มาสัมพุทโธมหาเกวาโอตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสคาโตโรกาวิโตอนุเตโรปุริสาธัมมาสติสัตตาตาวาปนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation, I will once again welcome all of you guys, those of you here at the temple and those of you guys joining us online, welcome, including those of you guys that joined us since we started meditating. This meditation that we just did is called Breathing Mindfulness Meditation. This is a primary form of training that the Buddha used in order to make his way to enlightenment. But you couldn't just meditate your way to enlightenment. You need other teachings besides just meditation. One of the biggest myths about the Buddha's life is that he sat under a tree, he meditated, and instantly got to enlightenment. But this isn't actually true. If you read his teachings and you study his life, you can see in the original source teachings that he talks about this gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. And you know this to be true because everything you've ever done in life has been that way. Whether it's learning to speak English or some job or occupation that you have, it's been gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So getting to enlightenment is the same way. You gradually train the mind through learning, reflecting to independently verify the teachings, and you practice. The teachings of the Buddha aren't about a bunch of beliefs and believing a lot of things and then hoping something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on those to independently verify them, and then you practice them in order to transform your mind and uproot the pollution out of the mind. And as you get rid of these pollutions, you'll see the mind becoming more peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. The anger, frustration, sadness, anger, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all of these discontent feelings and others are gradually eliminated from the mind, making your way to enlightenment, to the point where you're never even in a bad mood anymore. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're always in a good mood. You'll notice the mind has focus, concentration, clarity of mind, and deep memory, because the mind has eliminated the pollutions that are causing the mind to be shaken up and unconcentrated, or the words that the Buddha used are muddle-minded, that the mind is no longer muddle-minded because you've purified the mind and eliminated the pollutions that cause it. So the breathing mindfulness meditation is a primary form of training that we use to develop mindfulness or awareness of mind. You're developing this awareness so that you can be aware of what's going on in the mind, because there's certain unwholesome things that are in the unenlightened mind, and there are certain wholesome things that are in the unenlightened mind, and you would like to get rid of the unwholesome things and arise the wholesome and support those and encourage those. Don't allow those wholesome things to fade away. So you learn as part of this path what is unwholesome in the mind and what is what is wholesome, so that you can eliminate the unwholesome and you can arise the wholesome. So having mindfulness or awareness of mind is key to that. So by exercising the mind in meditation to develop mindfulness and develop concentration, you'll be able to then focus the mind and have that awareness. And then you'll be able to easily let things go, because you're training the mind to let go. The goal of this meditation isn't to eliminate your thoughts. Sometimes people think, based on the guidance, that we're cutting off and letting go of thoughts and bringing the mind back to the breath, that the goal is to eliminate thoughts. But as long as you're alive, you're going to have thoughts. You can't eliminate your thoughts. But you'd like to notice sooner and sooner that you're having a thought. That's the mindfulness, being aware that there is a thought, and then being able to easily let it go and bring the mind back to the breath. That's what you're working towards. Even an enlightened being is going to have an occasional thought during meditation, but they're going to notice it right away, and they're going to bring the mind back to the breath. Where in the unenlightened state, you might have a bombardment of thoughts. If you had a lot of thoughts today, that's very normal for someone who's starting off on the path to enlightenment. Or you might have had a thought and indulged in that thought for a period of time before you realized and remembered, like, oh yeah, that's right, I'm meditating. I need to bring my mind back to the breath. So if these things are occurring, that's normal, and you would just like to continue to practice and develop your mind, exercising the mind about 2 or 3 times a day, building up to 30 minutes or more. And this takes time to build up to that. Students often take 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to 2 or 3 sessions for 30 minutes or more. You might start out at 5 or 10 or 15 minutes per session. You need to maybe clear some things out of your life. You need to develop the ability to practice the meditation. But over a consistent long-term period, you develop your practice to exercise the mind, where you're developing this mindfulness, this concentration, and the ability to easily let go. Because the mind is causing its own discontent feelings, you can actually eliminate them. In the unenlightened state, we oftentimes think that other people are causing us to be angry, or other people are annoying us, or other people are causing us to be frustrated. But that's actually not true. Your mind is causing its own anger, its own frustration. You can learn this in the teachings of the Buddha, where you can independently verify that your mind is causing these discontent feelings itself. And that's the reason why you can eliminate them. You don't need to go out in the world and train 8 billion people to do things your way. You only need to train your own mind. And by training your own mind, you can get to the peace and the joy of the enlightened mind. But when the mind has what we call wrong view, where you have this misunderstanding or this misperception that other people are causing you to be angry, what you will tend to do is push people away out of your life, thinking that that's going to solve the problem. When you get angry and you experience those painful feelings, you'll tend to push people out of your life and think that that's going to solve the problem, but it doesn't, because you just get angry or irritated or annoyed about something else. Or you'll become bitter and harsh and hostile towards somebody, almost feeling justified in your anger and your hostility or your aggression. And then people might choose to leave out of your life because of that. Or you might put your expectations on people, trying to control people to do things your way. And this is all because the mind has this wrong view, where it's misunderstanding what the true problem is. In the unenlightened state, we think the problem is outside of ourselves. We think that somebody else is the problem. So that's why we push people away. We become bitter and harsh towards people, or we put our expectations on people, trying to control them to do things our way. But this never works because you keep getting angry and irritated and frustrated over and over and over again. But when you understand what the true problem is and you start working towards that solution, which is what the Buddhist teachings provide you, is the solution of how to escape these discontent feelings, then when you implement the solution, you can see that the mind becomes more peaceful and more joyful. And part of that solution is the meditation. The meditation is part of that training that you need, but there's a whole host of other teachings that you need besides meditation to actively train the mind in your day-to-day life. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause and see if you guys have any questions on meditation, because oftentimes students are building up their meditation practice and they might have questions about that. So if you're here at the temple, you can ask any and all questions that you like. We have these microphones in the white bowl that if you could use that microphone, the people online will be able to hear your question. And for those of you guys online, if you have questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section. I'll be able to see that and answer your question. Or if you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions that you like. So do you guys have any questions on meditation or anything that I've been talking about so far? All right, I'm not seeing any questions here. So what I'm going to do then is I'll transition into sharing some teachings with you guys that are helpful for you to be able to make your way towards enlightenment. As part of this group learning program, which is a 7-month program that I teach on Sundays and Wednesdays, we use the first volume of this book series. It's titled Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. And each Sunday I go chapter by chapter, sharing teachings with students to help them understand the path to enlightenment. And today, we're in chapter 7, and we restart this program every 7 months, and we teach it here at the temple, and we also live stream it in the morning like this when I'm at the temple, and then in the evening at 9 p.m. I'll be at home live streaming it as well. So no matter where you are in the world, either 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. Thai time, you should be able to get a live class. And then where you can't make the live class, it's recorded on Facebook, YouTube, or on our podcast, and you can learn. These books are available on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can download the book for free. You can take it and go print it if you like, or you can order printed copies on Amazon, or you can get printed copies here. And this way you'll have the words of the Buddha to be able to gradually learn the teachings that guide you to this enlightened mental state. Today's topic as part of chapter 7 is called the 5 Precepts, a householder's guide to daily practice. These are 5 important and very impactful decisions that you might make during your life at different times. And if you have wisdom of these teachings, then you'll be able to make wiser decisions that are going to produce wholesome results in your life. Whereas if you lacked wisdom of these teachings, you'll naturally make unwise decisions just because you have this unknowing of true reality. And therefore, when you make unwise decisions, it's going to lead to unwholesome results. If you've ever studied the 5 precepts before and you worked with teachings that were sharing like no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants, this isn't actually the words of the Buddha. This isn't what the Buddha taught. I'm going to use the original words of the Buddha to help you see what he actually taught. The 5 precepts, they're not rules, they're not commandments. He's not trying to force or control you to do anything specific. Instead, what he's doing is he's helping you to learn this natural law of Kamma. This natural law of Kamma is what you're awakening your mind to as you learn the path to enlightenment. That you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and you're practicing them in order to train your mind. In the unenlightened state, you're unaware of this natural law. Some people refer to it as karma. In the original teachings of the Buddha, which are in the Pali language, the word Kamma is used. So people who study the original words of the Buddha will typically use the word Kamma. This isn't punishments and rewards. It's not mystical or magical. It's not a dark cloud that's following you around. It's not any being that's controlling what you experience on a day-to-day basis. It's your decisions that determine what you experience in any given situation. It's this cause and effect, or this action and result. It's the results of your decision. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. And naturally, if you have wisdom about this natural law, you will make wise decisions that produce wholesome results. But also naturally, if you have a lack of wisdom, you will tend to make unwise decisions that lead to unwholesome results. And each thing that you experience in life, either wholesome or unwholesome, it's coming from certain decisions that you've made. So when you awaken to this natural law of Kamma, you can understand this cause and effect, or this causality of what's happening and what decisions you're making that are leading to any particular results that you're experiencing. As long as we blame other people for what we experience in our life, then you're basically powerless. You can't change anything about your life, because anything that you're experiencing is because of somebody else. It's not because of something you did or something you experienced. So the natural law of Kamma, it's not about blame. It's not about fault. It's not anything like that. It's about understanding this sequencing of events, or this cause and effect, or this causality, and understanding that when you have wisdom about this natural law, you can make these wiser decisions that produce wholesome results. The same thing was true when we all were born. We were affected by the natural law of gravity. Whether we knew about this natural law or not, we were affected by this natural law. And when we gained wisdom of this natural law, we made wiser decisions that produced more wholesome results. But when we lacked wisdom of the natural law of gravity, we made unwise decisions, and it produced unwholesome results. We fell down, we hit our head, we bumped our elbow, we fell and broke things. We had all kinds of struggles and difficulties in life with this natural law of gravity because we lacked wisdom of it. And then slowly but surely, we gained wisdom that by the time we were 10 or 12, we learned to tie our shoes really tight. We learned to look at the surface of the sidewalk. We learned to balance ourselves on bicycles and climb ladders and all kinds of things, because we awoke to the wisdom of the natural law of gravity. So the same thing needs to occur in order for an individual to no longer struggle and have difficulties in life, moving the mind to this enlightened mental state. You need to awaken to the natural law of Kamma, of this cause and effect, so that you can see it very clearly for yourself. So these 5 precepts that the Buddha taught, what he's doing is he's sharing with you the natural law of Kamma, this cause and effect, so that you can understand what wise decisions you can make. He's not trying to tell you how to live your life or what you should or shouldn't do. He's just helping you to be able to see this natural law, and then you learn it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and then you practice it. So as part of our class, I'm going to be sharing the original words of the Buddha on these 5 precepts, and then I invite you to learn them, to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and practice it and see the truth for yourself. And I will share some different examples with you of our life, of how to apply these teachings to your life, because these teachings, they're not black and white. Oftentimes people want to think of them as black and white, like that: no killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, no lying, no intoxicants. That sounds like a bunch of rules and a bunch of commandments. It sounds black and white, and that's not the way that the Buddha taught at all. You're going to see much more illuminating language from the Buddha than just that. And then when you see, as I start helping you to understand how to apply this, you're going to see this large gray area that will become less and less gray for you as you awaken to the wisdom of these natural laws. And namely, here we're going to be studying the 5 precepts. So the 5 precepts are a guide that significantly reduce unwholesome Kamma in your life, so that you can assist in producing this pure mind and this pure life. It's the 8-fold path that will completely eliminate all your unwholesome Kamma. And the 5 precepts plug into the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the core central teaching of the Buddha, and the 5 precepts plug into it. If you learn the 5 precepts and you only practice the 5 precepts, you'll significantly reduce your unwholesome results in life, or your unwholesome Kamma, but you won't extinguish it. The way to fully extinguish your unwholesome Kamma and experience only wholesome Kamma is through the Eightfold Path. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing unwholesome results in your life, because you've completely awoke to this natural law and you're only making wise decisions. And now when you make these wise decisions, only wholesome things come back to you. But when you lack wisdom of all these various teachings that the Buddha shared, you will make unwise decisions and you will experience unwholesome results in your life. So the 5 precepts are helping you to significantly reduce the unwholesome results that you experience, but it's the Eightfold Path that is helping you to fully extinguish it 100%. And the 5 precepts plug into the Eightfold Path. These are detailed teachings that will help you to practice harmlessness. It's integrated into the Eightfold Path. And some of the things that I'm going to be sharing with you on the 5 precepts, these are probably some things that you learned from your primary caregivers when you were growing up. Whether it was your mom or your dad or your aunts and uncles or your grandparents, you probably learned some aspect of what I'm going to share with you as part of the 5 precepts. But what you're going to see is that the Buddha uses very illuminating language to very clearly articulate in a very precise and concise way to help you understand these teachings. And then when you learn through the original words of the Buddha, you can apply it to your life more readily. Where if you haven't learned with the original words of the Buddha, you don't fully have the wisdom that you need to be able to apply these teachings into your life. So let me give you an example. This first precept. These are the words of the Buddha on the top, where he says, abandoning the taking of life, refrain from taking life without stick or sword, diligent, compassionate, trembling for the welfare of all living beings. This is what the Buddha said. And some people translate this as no killing. He's not saying no killing. He's not saying preserve all life at all costs. That's not what he's saying. He's saying to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. What he's essentially helping you do in all his different teachings is not only awaken to this natural law of Kamma, but to eliminate the pollutions of mind. There's 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered, which is called the 10 fetters. A fetter is like a shackle and a chain and a ball around your ankle that keeps the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. There are certain pollutions that are in the mind that keeps it continuing to experience things like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. And one of those pollutions is called ill will, or anger, hatred, ill will. And there's lesser versions like frustration and agitation and resentfulness and things like that. Well, this particular precept is helping you to eliminate the anger, hatred, ill will, and the lesser versions of that. If you can live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, you can cultivate this loving kindness in the mind, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. But if you're going around intentionally killing other beings, then there needs to be a certain amount of anger, hatred, ill will, or other versions of that in the mind in order to allow you to continue to kill other beings. So there's other techniques and tools that we use, like loving kindness meditation, in order to cultivate loving kindness in the mind, having this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, or this active goodwill. So we use loving kindness meditation in order to cultivate loving kindness in the mind, and then we practice it through our intentions, our speech, and our actions. But then also we practice precepts like this, where we understand that it's unwise to kill living beings. But let's talk about it in detail and really investigate this so that you can learn it, you can reflect on it, and then if you choose to practice, you can practice. So when you see the words of the Buddha like this, you're not believing what he says. You would like to start learning it, reflecting it, and practicing it to be able to see the truth. So when you see a teaching where he's talking about living compassionately for all living beings, the first thing you might ask yourself is, well, what's a living being? Don't just assume that you know what a living being is. You need to awaken to the wisdom of what is a living being. Well, here I give you kind of a short way to think about what a living being is, which is a being that comes from an egg, a sperm, and it has a consciousness. This is like a short way to think about a living being. But the Buddha actually teaches what's called the 5 aggregates, or the 5 collections, or the 5 elements. These are the 5 things that he says all living beings have. They have physical form, they have feelings, they have perceptions, there's something called volitional formations, and a consciousness. So I'm going to explain what these things are, and you can reflect on this while you're sitting here, because you know you're a living being, and you can ask yourself, do you have these 5 things? Physical form, that's the tangible material things that we have. This is physical form, right? So you know you have physical form. Then there's feelings. pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. These are like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. Then there's things like shyness or displeasure that's in the mind. These are pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant. So a living being is going to have feelings. Then the third aggregate or collection or element is called a perception. What a perception is your views and opinions of the world. You look out at the world and you have certain views and certain opinions about the world. You have certain perceptions. So a living being is going to have a perception. They're going to have various perceptions in their mind. Then the fourth one is called volitional formations. What this is choices and decisions, that you have various choices and decisions that you make. That's what a living being is going to be able to do, is make certain choices and decisions. These are called volitional formations. Then the fifth aggregate is called a consciousness. This is the mind itself. So if you have 5 aggregates, you're a living being. Form, feeling, perception, volitional formations, which are choices and decisions, and then a consciousness, right? So you can see you have all 5 of these things. So you can independently reflect and see every living being, whether it's a cat, a dog, a cow, a bird, or any living being has all 5 of these things. But then the way that you ultimately can independently verify that the Buddha is explaining the truth here is take something that's not a living being, like this chair. This chair isn't a living being. We all know that. So you can reflect on it and see, does it have all 5 aggregates? Does it have physical form, the first aggregate? Does this chair have physical form? Yeah, you guys are all nodding your head, yes. Does it have feelings? No, it doesn't have feelings, right? Does it have perceptions? Does it have views and opinions about the world? No, it doesn't, right? Does it have volitional formations? Can it make choices and decisions? Can it choose to pick itself up and relocate itself? No, it can't. And does it have a consciousness or a mind? No, it doesn't. So we can see that this chair doesn't have all those 5 aggregates, and therefore it's not a living being. Well, sometimes we use language in the unenlightened state to represent things that aren't true reality. We might say that we're killing a tree, or we're killing a virus, or we're killing a bacteria. We're not truly killing a tree or killing a virus or killing a bacteria because it's not a living being. It doesn't have all 5 aggregates. Plants don't have all 5 aggregates. And viruses and bacteria, they don't have all 5 aggregates. So oftentimes we might use that language in the unenlightened state, but it's not representing true reality. What we're really doing is we're harvesting a tree, or we're harvesting broccoli, or we're harvesting an apple. We're not killing it, right? We're harvesting it. Or like a virus or a bacteria, we're eliminating the virus, or we're eliminating the bacteria. We're not killing it, right? Because it's not a living being. So it's important to start understanding the language that we use and use it in the accurate way. Part of awakening to enlightenment is understanding vocabulary and gaining the wisdom of how to use vocabulary in an accurate way that represents true reality. So oftentimes you might say that you're killing something when in reality you're not truly killing it. You're just either eliminating it or harvesting it. If you're killing a being that has 5 aggregates, that's actually killing a being, right? So here what the Buddha is saying is to live compassionate for the welfare of all living beings. And now that you understand what a living being is a little bit more, now you might reflect and consider these types of things, like euthanasia of a human or an animal, or termination of a pregnancy, or suicide, or assisted suicide, or capital punishment, or war, or government-sponsored killings, or murders. These are all intentional killings, but remember, the Buddha isn't saying preserve all life at all costs. There's a real gray area here that you need to look at. So let's take one of these, or maybe 2 of these, and kind of penetrate into them more deeply so that you can see how to apply these precepts in any given situation. Let's take one like terminating pregnancy. Some people consider this a political issue. I don't consider it a political issue. It's a human issue. It's something that us human beings interact with and we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So let's talk about this, because you can see that perhaps in some cases it might be needed, and in some cases it might not be needed. It's a personal choice for each individual to decide. For me as a teacher, teacher. I'm not here to tell people what they should or shouldn't do in their life. I'm just here to teach people what the natural laws are, and then how you choose to implement those into your life is your choice. I would help somebody regardless of what they choose in their life. I don't have any particular agenda, or I'm not trying to convince people to do any one particular thing or another, but instead you can understand the natural law of Kamma through looking at these various examples. So let's take this one of terminating a pregnancy. The Buddha is not saying preserve all life at all costs. If we have a female who's pregnant and the fetus, we know from medical technology, is never going to have a viable life, and it's not going to actually live outside the womb, and it's threatening the woman's life, would it be living compassionately if we allowed that fetus to continue to grow inside the woman, and the woman could actually die as a result of this? Well, we know that the fetus isn't going to be viable. It's not going to be able to live outside the womb, but it's threatening the woman's life, and she could potentially die. If someone allowed that to continue, then this could be not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. To live compassionately for the welfare of living beings, the woman might decide that she would like to terminate this pregnancy. And that could be a wise decision for her. And that's her decision, because she only understands all the variables in her life. An individual outside of that person's life can't really understand all the variables and decide for her what she should or shouldn't do in life. Only she can decide that. So if a woman came to me, or if a couple came to me and asked me for advice, what they should do, I wouldn't actually tell them whether they should abort the baby or whether they should. That's not my role. My role is to share the natural law of Kamma and say, okay, if you choose to terminate the pregnancy, here's the results based on the natural law of Kamma. If you choose to maintain the pregnancy, here's the results that you might experience as a result of that. And then it's up to the woman to decide, or up to the couple to decide what they would like to do. So this precept is not saying preserve all life at all costs. It's saying to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So in this case, if a woman did decide to terminate her pregnancy, she's living compassionately for all living beings, because the compassion has to start with you. In order for you to have compassion for others, you need to have compassion for this being who you are right now, right? You would find it very difficult to have compassion for others if you didn't have compassion for yourself. What compassion is concern for the misfortune of others. That's what you would like to practice in this precept, is having concern for the misfortune of others. So here, the teachings of the Buddha, you would need to reflect on each one of these and figure out, is it something that you would participate in? Let's take another one. Let's take something like war or government-sponsored killing. These natural laws of existence, they're a much higher law than what the human laws are. The human laws, a government can tell an individual in their country, like, you can go to that other country and you can fight those people and you can kill them. And when you come back, we're not going to prosecute you for murder. You can go kill all those people that you like. But if you kill someone in our country, we're going to prosecute you for murder. So a government can tell somebody to do this. This is a human law. It's not the natural law of Kamma. The way that this natural law of Kamma works is it's affecting all of us, irregardless of the human laws. The natural law of Kamma is a much higher law. So that individual who might choose to go off into war, because they're killing, they're not living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, and they're very likely to be killed themselves. They could potentially be killed in this situation. Their lifespan could be very short, or they could be injured, right? They can get amputations, or they could have traumatic brain injuries, or in some cases, people get addicted to drugs and alcohol that go off and fight in wars, or they might commit suicide as a result of their experience in war. And this is the result of that individual's decision to not understand the natural law of Kamma. They're choosing to go off into war and fight. So here, when you look at each one of these, the Buddha is not telling you, and I'm not telling you what you should or shouldn't do, because you have to decide for yourself and what you should do. Things like defense and protection, you would need to decide in a certain situation based on all the variables, what should I do in this situation? If you're at home sleeping and someone breaks into your house at 2 a.m. in the morning, they break into the window, They're not bringing you chocolate and flowers. I guarantee you, right? People don't break into your house at 2 a.m. in the morning to bring you chocolate and flowers. They're coming to do some harm, and you need to make a decision. What do you do in the situation? Well, what I would advise a student to do is, if possible, to get out of the house. If somebody's going to steal, if somebody's going to rob something or break something up, let it happen, right? You just leave, go call the police, let the police come. They have the tools, the training, and the techniques to be able to deal with this kind of thing. But there may be a situation where you're backed up into the corner and you don't have any other option but to harm this being who's coming at you. And if you chose to do this, this is that person's Kamma. That person is choosing to break into a house. They're choosing to come cause harm. And now harm is coming to that person because of their choices and decisions. That's the unwise decisions that they made. And now they're experiencing the unwholesome results of that. So the Buddha isn't telling you to preserve all life at all cost. In order to have loving kindness and compassion, you need to first have loving kindness and compassion for yourself. So if you just stood there and let this person beat you up and hurt you and injure you or the people around you, this wouldn't be living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. You're just standing by, letting somebody beat up on your child or beat up on your life partner or injure you. This would be unwise. So the Buddha isn't saying preserve all life at all cost. He's saying to live compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. So in that situation, if somebody was attacking in our house, if I could leave, I would just leave. But if I had to defend, then I would do that with the least amount of harm as possible, right? If they only have a baseball bat or a piece of wood or something, I'm going to try to get it out of their hand, or I'm going to try to pick up a piece of wood or a baseball bat that's maybe bigger than their baseball bat and try to take care of this situation, right? So you've got to decide in the present moment, what is the wisest decision? And by causing the least amount of harm possible, you'll meet with the best results. But in this situation, if somebody came with a gun or a knife or something like this, you might have to take that person's life. And you can rest at ease because this person came to cause harm, and now this harm is coming to them, and you're living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings, this being who you are now. And by maintaining your calmness and composure, which is what the Buddhist teachings are helping you to learn how to do, you'll be able to make a wise decision in those situations. Whereas if your mind's all shaken up and unsteady and uncalm, and you have a lot of fear in your mind when this person comes, then you're going to lack the ability to make wise decisions. So the teachings of the Buddha are helping you to learn how to not have fear, how to not all be shaken up in these types of situations. You can get to the point where even if somebody broke into your house at 2 a.m. in the morning, you wouldn't be fearful, and you'd be able to maintain your calmness and composure. And then you'd be able to make wise decisions that produce wholesome results for yourself. There's other things that you'll need to think about, something like a DNR. I don't know if you guys have this in your country. Some countries have it, some countries don't. This is a do not resuscitate. What this is a agreement or a contract or a legal document that you can put in place that says, if this body dies, do not use medical technology to bring me back to life. Don't use medical technology to resuscitate me. This isn't an intentional killing. You've already died. And what you're saying is, I'm completely comfortable with this death. Don't use medical technology to bring me back. So if somebody chooses to use a DNR, which is a do not resuscitate order, it's a legal document that says you're not interested in being brought back to life with medical technology, you're still practicing this precept. You haven't intentionally killed yourself. You're just choosing to not be brought back to life. You've already died. You're just not interested in using medical technology to bring yourself back to life. Something else that you'll need to think about is consuming animal products and whether or not that's a wise decision for you. Because when you're eating animal products, you're not just eating the flesh or the animal products, you're actually ingesting drugs and hormones and toxins that are being put into the animal by farmers or maybe the polluted groundwater that they're drinking. So when you ingest flesh of an animal, you're ingesting those drugs, those hormones, those toxins and things like that. And it affects affects your body in an unwholesome way, that you'll experience more sickness and you'll experience even certain cloudiness in the mind. If you eliminate animal products from your food intake, you'll notice more health in the physical body and more clarity in the mind. They've taken wild fish out of very clean streams in places like America, and they tested the flesh of the fish to see what it has. And they found things like cocaine, antidepressants, and other drugs and hormones and toxins in this otherwise very clean stream. And the reason why is because these things have been put into the water table by human beings. We've flushed cocaine and antidepressants and other medications into the water table, and now even clean running streams are polluted with these various substances. And when you're eating the flesh of an animal, there's needing to be a killing that it needs to occur in order for you to ingest that meat. And then when you ingest that meat, it produces more sickness and it produces a lack of clarity in the mind. And if you ever chose to gradually move away from meat and start eating plant-based foods, you'll notice less sickness in the body and more clarity in the mind. But if somebody chooses to do that, is their choice. It's not something that you're forced to do. It's not something that anybody's going to tell you to do. But as you develop more and more loving kindness and compassion in your mind, you might choose to gradually move to a plant-based food supply, realizing that you can completely sustain your life on a plant-based food supply. We don't actually need meat in order to sustain our life. You can get all the nutrients that you need through a plant-based food supply. So let me pause here and see if you guys have any questions on any of these before I move into the next one. Again, you guys can ask questions here at the temple. We have microphones so that the people online can hear you guys. There's a little switch on that you just turn it on. You don't need to be afraid of the microphone or anything like that. You're welcome to ask questions. And those of you guys online, you can put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Do you guys have any questions on this first precept? How are you doing, Beck? You doing good? Good. When Byline wakes up, maybe you guys can play. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. So let's move on to the next one, which is the second precept. Again, we're going to use the words of the Buddha, then I'm going to break it down for you to help you understand it. Here's the words of the Buddha. He says, abandoning the taking of what is not given, living purely, accepting what is given, awaiting what is given, without stealing. So the teachings of the Buddha are all based around not causing harm, because if you cause harm, harm will come back to you. Like that first precept, if we cause harm through killing, then harm comes back to us. But then you can see that in certain situations, you might need to protect yourself in order to live compassionately for all living beings. When an individual is stealing, there's a certain craving in the mind. There's a longing, there's a yearning, there's a wanting this material object. And rather than doing the work to earn this for myself, I'm going to steal it from somebody else. There's a certain longing, yearning, a craving, a desire in the mind. So the Buddha is teaching you a precept that helps to eliminate your craving, desire, attachments, which is the cause of your discontent feelings. But it's also helping to protect you against any harm. Because if you steal things from somebody, that person is going to be harmed. Like, for example, if I stole somebody's car, they wouldn't be able to go to work, which would be hard for them to earn money. They wouldn't be able to maybe go get food or to go to the grocery store, or they wouldn't be able to take their child to school or something like this. There's all different things that they would not be able to do as a result of me stealing their car. So by you stealing someone's car, you're causing harm to this individual, and now harm's going to come to you. This person might find you, they might beat you up, they might murder you, you might get arrested by the police. A lot of places it's illegal to steal, most places it is. That's a human law, but also the natural law of Kamma, you can see that it's unwise to steal. But the Buddha's giving you a lot more detail here than just not stealing. He's also talking about some other things here as well. Like, for example, if you assume something can be taken or used, this can cause harm, and then harm can come to you. So say I'm in a college class and I show up and I have a certain paper that I need to submit to my professor, and I'm going to turn this paper in to get a grade. And when I come into the class, the professor is not there, and I see a stapler on their desk, and I pick up their stapler in order to staple my paper. And right when I'm stapling the paper, the professor walks in and sees that I'm using their stapler. And they're like, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you using my stapler?" Right, in this situation, maybe the professor is holding on to their stapler really tightly, and now I'm here using something that I've assumed I can use, and now this person can get angry and frustrated and irritated. They're causing their own anger and frustration, but they don't necessarily realize that. They might attribute their anger and their painful feelings to me. And now that I'm stapling this paper and turning it in, I could get a bad grade, right? I could fail the entire class because this person is angry and hostile, and now they want to take that out on me by giving me a bad grade. So the wiser thing to do is to not assume that something can be used and just ask, "Hey, professor, would it be okay if I used your stapler?" And they're either going to say yes or no. And if they say yes, okay, great, you use it, you've got permission, no big deal. If they say no, you can't use it, okay, you got to find another way to get this paper stapled. Maybe another student or another teacher or professor might have a stapler, or you can go to 7-Eleven and get one or something like that. But if you just assume that something can be used, you might find yourself in a situation where you're causing harm to somebody, and now harm comes back to you. This next part is accepting what is given. You can see that in the teachings of the Buddha, where he's saying, accept what is given. What he's talking about here is that when people choose to give you things, they're practicing generosity. This is an important practice that you need to develop in order to get to enlightenment, is to practice the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. That you share your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources. This is going to help you to eliminate selfishness, where you're no longer holding on to things very tightly, but you're willing to give and share your time, effort, energy, and resources. This will help you to train your mind to let go and no longer hold on to things very tightly. So if somebody's choosing to practice generosity with you, where they're giving you something, it's helping their mind. It's helping them to practice generosity and helping them to train their mind to let go. So if you were to reject what somebody was offering you, you're shutting down the opportunity for that person to be able to practice generosity and enhance their mind. And then as you shut people down more and more, you'll find that less and less people will be interested in practicing generosity with you, because you're not willing to accept what it is that they're offering. So they'll get used to you rejecting what it is that they're offering you, and then they'll just stop offering you things, and you'll see people won't practice generosity. So it would be much wiser for you to just accept what somebody is giving you. So if grandma gives you that sweater at Christmas or at any other time during the year, and you look at that sweater and you know that you're never going to wear this sweater ever in your life, you can still accept the sweater. This is helping grandma or grandpa to be able to practice generosity. And then you can practice generosity. You can give it to somebody else. In some cultures, they think that this is really bad. We call it re-gifting, and they think that it's better to put the sweater in the closet and just let it sit there for 20 years or 30 years and deteriorate. But in reality, if you choose to give this sweater to somebody else, you're practicing generosity too. And this is helping your mind. So this sweater might go through 3, 5, 10 different hands before it finds that one person that's like, this is the best sweater I've ever seen in my entire life. I'm going to wear it every day. This is so beautiful. Thank you so much. And in the meantime, 6, 8, 10 people were practicing generosity. So this can be really helpful. So the Buddha teaches to accept what is given. But remember, this isn't black and white. If somebody offered you cocaine or heroin, would you accept it? No, right? So this isn't black and white. This is wisdom that the Buddha is teaching you, that if somebody's offering you something, okay, you see what they're offering. And if it's an innocent enough thing and you're just not going to use it, okay, you can hand it off to somebody else. But if it's something like cocaine or heroin or crystal methamphetamine or a stolen car or something like that, you're not going to accept this gift. You're going to say, no, I'm sorry, I don't need that, right? Or whatever you're going to say, however you're going to say it. So you need to use wisdom to move to this higher consciousness and use wise decision making. This is called discernment, that you use discernment or wise decision making with these precepts to be able to make wise decisions based on all the variables. You might be in a situation where somebody's giving you all kind of lavish gifts because they want something from you. Maybe they want something from you, and now they're just giving you gifts and because they want to get something from you. And if you ask them questions when they're giving you a gift, what do you expect from me? And they're like, oh, I want you to come home with me tonight and do this, that, or the other thing. Or I want you to buy this particular product, and I'm only giving you these gifts because I want you to buy something from me. Well, in this situation, it's not pure generosity. They're giving something with expectations of you. And it would be unwise to accept a gift if somebody has an expectation of you to give them something. So here, the accepting what is given needs to be practiced with discernment or wise decision making. And in some situations, you might need to ask questions of the person. What do you expect from me? Or what is that white powdery substance? Is that cocaine or is that flour, right? So you'll need to use your wise decision making and understanding the practice here and what the Buddha is guiding you to practice. And then there's awaiting what is given. What this is that if you have a partner, say, for example, you're living with a family member or a life partner, and let's just say they're going on a business trip. And on this business trip, that this particular town they're going to has really great chocolate candy or something or another. If you put your expectation on this person to find this particular item for you, now you're burdening them with your craving and your desire. And now they're going to go around looking for this thing. And if they can't find it, they're going to be irritated and annoyed potentially if they're having craving, desire, attachment. And then if they come back and they don't have what you wanted, they didn't meet your expectation, you're going to be angry and annoyed because of your craving, desire, attachment. So the Buddha teaches you to await what is given. If somebody would like to give you a gift, let them give you a gift. But when you put your expectations on people wanting a gift, now you're going to potentially set yourself up to be angry and irritated and annoyed when they don't get you what you want, right? So the Buddha teaches you to await what is given. So any questions here on this particular precept? Yes, ma'am. If you could use the microphone there.
I would like to discuss about this situation as I watch a documentary about the Japanese aging society. Some elderly try to steal something from the local grocery store, not because they want them to get in trouble, but they want to get into the prison because in the prison there's some people that can take care of the elderly better than they stay at home. My point is they not try to steal in purpose to get other people under trouble, but they steal because they wanted to just get into the prison. Yeah, is that considered to break this precepts?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So if you're stealing, you're causing harm to somebody, and then you're going to experience the unwholesome results of that. So anytime you steal, you're opening yourself up to unwholesome results. So doesn't matter that you're trying to get to a prison that will take care of you. If you steal, now if that person finds out that you stole, they can come and beat you up and injure you or murder you or any kind of number of different things like that. And going through the process of being arrested and going to court and all these different things, it's all the exact same thing. Anytime you steal, it's unwise to do so. Mm-hmm.
Another question, what about if they steal and then they return it to the owner?
So in this situation, when you steal, it's an unwise decision that you've made that choice, and now you're going to experience unwholesome results, your unwholesome Kamma. But if you return it back, this is trying to clean up your Kamma. This is what you do as part of the path to enlightenment, is you try to extinguish all your unwholesome Kamma and eliminate it. And part of that would be to return it back. I just saw something online recently that there was a famous celebrity who stole a lot of candy from 7-Eleven when they were growing up. And they just recently decided to go buy all this candy and give it back to the 7-Eleven as a way to clean up their Kamma. That's not what they said, but when I'm looking at it, that's what an individual can do, is you can clean up your kamma, because you're going to experience the results of any unwise decisions that you make. You're going to experience those results either in this life or some future life. You can't run and hide from the results of your decisions. So if you have unwholesome kamma where you've stolen something, it would be wise to clean that up. And one of the ways to do that is to return an item that you've stolen, and that can be a way to clean it up. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. There you go.
Yeah, does that mean I can do all the bad things and what I want, like killing people, everything, and then after that I can clear all my kamma?
It would be unwise to do those things like killing and stealing and so forth, because in that situation, you can die, you can get injured, you can go to jail. You're going to have the results. You're going to experience the results of your decisions regardless. But in situations where you know you've made unwise decisions that are producing unwholesome results, you can clean this up. But depending on how significant the decisions that you made and the unwholesome results, it might take you multiple lifetimes to be able to clean that up. So if you went out and you killed a bunch of people, you're going to be in jail most likely, or you're going to get injured and murdered yourself. And now that's part of extinguishing your unwholesome kamma, but you can't just completely negate it like, in the blink of an eye. You're going to need to clean it up gradually. Like, I'll give you an example. Like, before I knew these teachings, I was a pretty angry, pretty hostile, pretty aggressive person at different times in my life. And I was treating the people around me this way, including my wife. And as I started learning these teachings and I cleaned up my practice, for about 1.5 years or so, my wife was still being angry and hostile and bitter to me, even though I was being loving and kind and friendly, because I had conditioned her mind that David is an angry, hostile, bitter guy. So I was doing that with her for so many years that even when I cleaned up my practice and I started being loving and kind and gentle, she was still being bitter and harsh and hostile with me. So I had to clean that up. And it took me about 1.5 years to clean that up. And now we never argue. We're never upset with each other. We're very friendly and loving. And there's never a harsh word between us. But it took time to extinguish that. So that was something that I was able to extinguish in this life. But in terms of like killing a human being or these other things, it's very challenging to extinguish that type of significant decision in just one life. It oftentimes takes multiple lives to extinguish those kinds of things. But there are things like stealing and other things like that that you can extinguish in this life.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. Okay, so let's go on to the next precept. I'm not seeing any more questions. This next precept is oftentimes translated as no sexual misconduct. Well, the Buddha explained a lot more than that. He didn't just say no sexual misconduct, because the first question is, well, what's sexual misconduct? Who determines what that is? Well, the Buddha isn't determining what sexual misconduct is. He's just describing to you the natural law of Kamma and helping you be able to see the truth for yourself. And then you learn it, you reflect on it to independently verify it, and you practice it. Even the ones that I've been teaching you so far. If you've done any of these things, you can independently reflect on it through your own direct experience and see that it produces unwholesome results. And in a situation where you made wise decisions, you can see that it produces wholesome results. So here the Buddha is giving you guidance on what would lead to harmful sexual contact. And if you caused harm through your sexual contact, this harm is going to come back to you. So I'm going to read it to you so you can see the words of the Buddha. Then we'll break it down and use various examples to be able to help you see it. And then you can directly reflect on it through your own experience in life or experiences that you know other people have had. So here the Buddha is saying, abandoning unchastity, abandoning sexual relations with women, men who are protected by their mother, father, and father, brother, sister, or relatives, who are protected by teachings, who have a husband, wife, or partner, whose violation entails a penalty, or even with one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. Okay, so he's teaching you how to not cause harm through your sexual contact. So let's go through a few examples here that will help you to be able to see how to apply this in your daily life. Well, one of the ones that he's teaching here is abandoning sexual relations with men, women who are protected by their mother, father, mother and father, brother, sister, or relatives. This is not having sex with minors. If you had sex with someone who was a minor, the minor is learning, they're developing, they're growing, their parents, their family are helping them to develop. And if you had sex with them, this would be a very impactful decision for that individual, and it would produce unwholesome results for that particular individual in the family. And this is going to cause harm, so therefore harm comes back to you. And in some cases, the human laws in most places are of this nature, that they say it's illegal to have sex with a minor. But there's actually some places in the world where it's not illegal to have sex with a minor. But you can see from the human law that the human law and the natural law of Kamma aren't typically in sync, that there's some cases where it's legal to do something, but if you understand the natural law of Kamma, you can see that it would be unwise to have sex with a minor. Then here, sex without consent. This is where the Buddha is saying whose violation entails a penalty. This would be like rape, right? If you forcibly had sex with somebody, this would produce a penalty, right? Because you're now forcing this person to have sex, you're harming that individual, and it's going to cause harm for you. Sex with multiple partners. This is where the Buddha is talking about abandoning unchastity. If you understand what chastity is like having no sex at all with nobody. They actually had these things in medieval times called chastity belts, where a father would have this metal underwear essentially with a lock on it, and they would lock their daughter's private area and not allow their daughters to have sex until they unlocked it, right? This was during medieval times, and this would be called chastity, where they're not having any sex whatsoever. So unchastity would be to have sex with lots of different people, multiple partners. And we can see that this causes harm, because if you've ever done that, or you know people that have done that, you can see that there's sexually transmitted diseases that can potentially come back to you. Or you might have to lie to different partners and have difficulties in your relationships by talking to people in unwise ways, and your mind might be obsessively trying to figure out what did you say to one person versus another in order to protect you from any kind of injury or damage that you might have as a result of cheating and going around and being with multiple different partners. So you would like to have a trusting and loyal relationship with just one partner. And then when you're done with that partner, move on to the next person who you're going to develop a relationship with and have a partnership with that person. But if you were having sex with multiple people at the same time, this can produce harm for you as far as experiencing sexually transmitted diseases, which some of those are actually fatal. You can actually die from some of the sexually transmitted diseases that we have in the world. Then sex while living at home with relatives. I'm putting this one in here to help you understand that in some cultures, this is quite normal, that you might meet a partner and then you talk to your family and say, hey, we're going to have a relationship, we're going to get married. Would it be possible for us to move into your home? Here in Thailand, this is very common, that if you meet a partner, you might not have the money to go off and buy your own house and live independently. So your parents might let you live at home with your partner for a period of time. And then when you save enough money, then you go out and buy your own home or rent your own home in order to start your family. And in this situation, the family has accepted the relationship, and this would be practicing this precept, because it's not this, you're not protected by your mother and father, brother, sister, or some other relative, but instead you've actually gotten the approval of your family in order to move in and actually live at home in order to start this relationship and build your finances, and then move out and actually acquire your own dwelling. This next one is where here what I'm saying is sex with someone who has previously decided to remain celibate. What this is where the Buddha is saying who are protected by teachings. That people who are really far along in their path to enlightenment, they have chosen to let go of sexual activity, that they no longer have sexual contact. Ordained practitioners do this, but there's also household practitioners who choose to no longer have sex. And that's not something you need to do right now. No one's ever going to force you or control you to do that. But at some point, you might decide to eliminate sexual contact from your life. And if you've chosen to do that, and someone were to try to lure you away from your celibacy, this would be causing harm, because the more enlightened people that are in the world, the better for everybody, because the wisdom of how to get to enlightenment will be more and more in the world. So the Buddha teaches not to have sex with somebody who's decided that they're going to remain celibate. Here in Thailand, that's pretty straightforward, because ordained practitioners are going to be wearing robes and shaving their head, and you know that they're not having sex. Also, people who wear all white, typically here in Thailand, if they're wearing white regularly every day, then this person also is chosen to eliminate sex. So you can use that as kind of a threshold that you can know that, okay, if somebody's doing this, then that's kind of helping you to understand, like, okay, this person isn't having sex any longer. And then if you're choosing to have sex, you can find a partner who is interested in doing that. And then this way you can make a wise decision in that regard. Also, sex with people who are already in committed relationships. If you're having sex with somebody who's already in a relationship, this is where the Buddha is saying, who have a husband, wife, or partner, or even one who has been garlanded by a man, woman, or partner as a sign of engagement. These are people who are already in a relationship. Even if you're single and you have a relationship with someone who's in a relationship and you're having sex with them, you can get injured, you can get murdered, you can get beat up, you can lose your reputation in the community. So it'd be really wise to make sure any sexual partners that you have, that you are their only sexual partner and they're not with anybody else. And same thing, sexually transmitted diseases can occur in this situation as well. And then sex outside of any relationships that you're committed to. If you have a committed, loyal, trusting relationship and you went outside of that relationship to have sex, it's going to damage your relationship, and it would be unwise for you to do that. Again, people can get injured, beat up, murdered, sexually transmitted diseases. It can destroy your relationship in these kinds of situations. And then the last one that I have here is sex with individuals who are human trafficked. In this situation, these people are being forced to have sex for money, and it would be unwise for you to have sex with that person, because you're entering into an environment where people can get robbed and murdered. Again, sexually transmitted diseases can occur. You can get arrested in these situations. You can get drugged or poisoned in these kinds of situations. It would be very unwise to go in that direction. And then there's some more that I'd like to talk about as well, that you can see how it relates to this as well. So any kind of paid sexual service, this is an individual who's having sex with multiple people for money. If you go into this situation, again, you can get robbed, you can get beat up, you can get murdered, you can get poisoned, you can get arrested in these situations. Notice that the Buddha doesn't talk about same gender relationships in this particular precept. He was aware of these things during his lifetime because he talks about it. He talks about it in his teachings, that there's certain men who don't identify with masculine qualities, and there's certain females who don't identify with feminine qualities. But he doesn't teach anything about it because he's just making the observation that it occurs. If you understand some of the core central teachings of the Buddha, then you understand that he already understood that it's not possible for every man to be interested in having sex with a female. And it's not possible for every female to be interested in having sex with a male. If this was the case, this would be permanence. But the Buddha teaches the universal truth of impermanence, meaning that everything around you is impermanent. There's not a steady, fixed state. It's not possible for everybody to own a car. It's not possible for everybody to have money. It's not possible for everybody to be healthy. It's not possible for everybody to have food in the world right now, right? As we look around the world, these things are all impermanent, that there's not a steady, fixed state. So if you study some of the core central teachings of the Buddha of this impermanence, then you understand that it's not possible for things to be permanent. So for example, right now it's sunny outside, but that sun is not permanent. Eventually it's going to rain, or there's going to be clouds, or there's going to be something else. The sun is impermanent, but the rain is also impermanent. Your relationships are impermanent. This physical body is impermanent. It's constantly changing. So everything around us is constantly changing. It's impermanent. So it's not possible for every man or every female to be interested in having sex with the opposite gender. This would be permanence. But we understand the natural laws in this universal truth of impermanence. So the Buddha didn't teach that same gender relationships is causing harm, because if there's two loyal, loving, consenting adults choosing to have sex, They're not causing harm to anybody. If a male or female decides to have sex, or two men or two females, if they're in a loyal, loving, consenting relationship, they're not causing harm to anybody at all. So that's why he didn't include it here. You can also understand transgender individuals through the teachings of the Buddha. If you understand this universal truth of impermanence, then you understand that every being that is born, that it's not possible for them to identify with the same gender as their sexual organs. So the mind is one thing, and the body is something completely different. And when the body and the mind come together, the body can be of one gender and the mind can be of another gender. So someone might have male sexual organs, but the mind might identify as being a female. Or the body might be female sexual organs and the mind identifies as a male. This is completely normal if you understand the universal truth of impermanence, or if you understand the cycle of rebirth. The Buddha teaches that there's this continuous cycle, that we've all been born countless times in the past. So maybe when we were lizards, maybe we were brothers, maybe you were a male in a previous life, and maybe I was your sister or something in a previous life, or maybe you were my father, right, in a previous life. If you're a female now, maybe you were my father in a previous life. You were a different gender perhaps in a previous life. So if you've been all these different genders in a previous life, when the mind ends up in this life with male sexual organs, the mind could identify as being a female, or with female sexual organs, the mind could identify as being a male. So it completely makes sense if you understand the universal truth of impermanence and the cycle of rebirth, that transgender individuals are completely normal. They're not doing anything wrong. They're not sick. They're not ill. It's not a disorder. It's just that the mind is of one gender and the body is of another gender. And it's not possible for these two things to match 100% of the time, because that would be permanence. And we understand the universal truth of impermanence. Oftentimes people are taught that masturbation is completely wrong and you shouldn't ever do it, and it would be, something that you should avoid and all these kinds of things. But let me teach you the gray area here with something like masturbation. With masturbation, it's not all immoral and it's not all wise either, right? So if somebody has a lot of sexual craving, let's just say they have 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends, and they're learning in these teachings that it would be unwise to have 10 boyfriends or 10 girlfriends, and they're like, oh my goodness, I should just have one. Let me bring it down to just one. But now they have this high sexual drive. Maybe they use a little bit of masturbation in order to bring their sexual drive down so that they can get to one boyfriend or one girlfriend. Or perhaps somebody has a craving to go out and rape somebody, and they decide to use some masturbation instead. In these situations, this can actually be a very helpful and very wholesome thing to do, if that's what you're choosing to use it for. But also, masturbation could be used in excess, where if somebody was masturbating 10, 15, 20 times a day, it could be excessive and the mind could be attached to this, and now somebody could be really challenged in this situation. So it's not about something is all good or all bad or all wise or unwise. Again, it's a gray area. You need to be able to look at, what are you truly trying to accomplish here? Are you trying to reduce your sexual craving and maintain a healthy sexual relationship with a partner? Or are you doing this excessively to the point where it's damaging your own mind? So you've got to look at that and decide for yourself as you progress in life. And then something like sex with animals, this isn't possible for an animal to give us consent to have sex with it. So this is why I'm sure if people tried to do that, they would probably get harmed or illnesses and all different kinds of issues with that. So it would be unwise. This is like a black and white thing, that it would be completely unwise to have sex with an animal. And then with pornography, this is something where oftentimes an individual might crave certain intimacy, and the mind might go into a pornography addiction. And if somebody chooses to do this, they're kind of going away further and further from the intimate contact with an actual partner. And this is taking the mind into a fantasy world. And even when you start coming out of that, oftentimes sexual relationships don't have the same satisfaction that they once did, because the mind can't ever fully live up to the fantasy world that has been created through the pornography. So if you're noticing that you have a craving for intimacy, it would be much wiser to go towards an actual partner and create an intimate relationship rather than going towards pornography and allowing the mind to go into that. It's also so supporting the unchastity of other individuals as they choose to have sex on film or things like this. Pornography wasn't something that existed during the lifetime of the Buddha because film and video and cameras and photography and things like this didn't exist during his lifetime. But you can see, if you understand these teachings, that it's supporting unchastity, and you can see, if you've ever gone into pornography, that it really dilutes the mind and takes you in a direction of a fantasy world that even when you come out, it's very challenging to then have satisfying sexual relationships because the mind has been so far into this fantasy world. So this is the third precept and some ways that you might look to apply it into your life. Do you guys have any questions on this particular precept? No? Okay. So let's go to the next one. This one's very straightforward, right? This one, the words of the Buddha are abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a truth speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. Okay, so some people teach this as no lying, right? So the Buddha is giving you much more illuminating language than this. He's saying abandoning false speech, refraining from false speech, a true speaker, one to be relied on, trustworthy, dependable, not a deceiver of the world. He's explaining to you the reasons why to ensure that you're not speaking with falsehoods, because you can be dependable, you can be trustworthy, you can be reliable. If you've ever done any lying, which I'm sure we all have, particularly as we were growing up as children, we tend to all lie as we're growing up, right? That you know that your mind is kind of obsessively trying to figure out, what did you say to one person versus what did you say to another person? And your mind's trying to keep all these lies straight. And it would be very challenging for you to ever get to a peaceful and joyful mind if you were lying to people, because your mind would have to obsessively try to figure out what you said to one person versus another. Also, as people discovered your lies, then they learned that you weren't trustworthy and you weren't dependable, and your personal and professional relationships struggled. So by you maintaining the truthfulness of your speech, you can then have trustworthy, dependable relationships where now in your personal and professional relationships, they can really blossom. The Buddha understood this natural law so well that here's another teaching that I inserted in here so that you guys could see this. He's actually teaching his son. A lot of times people think that the Buddha left his family and never came back, but he actually left for 6 years to train his mind to get to enlightenment. And then he came back and he spent time around his wife, his mother, his son. They actually all came to learn with him, and they all got to enlightenment during his lifetime. Here he's teaching his son to not lie, even when he's telling a joke. This is how closely the Buddha practiced this. If you can imagine a person who's in a class like this speaking all of this truth, but on the side, if they were telling jokes that had lies in them, their students wouldn't be able to know, are they telling the truth when they're teaching, or are they lying? What's going on here? So the Buddha always spoke the truth, even when he told a joke. It's a lot more challenging to tell jokes that are truthful, but you can actually do it. And it actually tends to be more funny when jokes are actually truthful, because it requires a lot of wisdom for you to be able to have those kind of jokes. But oftentimes in joking, people will be degrading or disparaging, or they're lying in their jokes. It would be much wiser for you, if you're going to tell jokes that are truthful. And then you can establish what we call in Thailand, we call it barami. Barami means the one who people listen to. If you have barami, it means that you're very influential in the community, and that people really listen to your advice and really heave your wisdom. They really listen and seek out your wisdom because you have barami. But if you're lying, people aren't going to trust you. People aren't going to consider you to have barami. You're not going to be very influential in your personal and professional relationships. So by improving your practice to the point where you're not lying, this will help you to develop deeper relationships and be more trustworthy, more dependable, and you'll find more opportunities in life, both personally and professionally, will help you in life. You guys have any questions on this particular precept? Okay, so let me go to the very last one, which is the fifth one. This one's really important because if you don't practice this one, you're more likely to do all the others. This one, the words of the Buddha are refraining from strong drink and sloth-producing drugs, substances that cause heedlessness, the basis for heedlessness. Well, again, when you're investigating the teachings of the Buddha, right away you might ask yourself, well, what is heedlessness? Because that's not really a common word that we use nowadays. Well, heedlessness is careless, thoughtless, inattentive, uncalm, unaware, and unmindful. If you're going to get to this enlightened mental state and purify the mind, you're going to need mindfulness. You're going to need awareness of mind. So if you're taking substances that promote heedlessness, which is unmindfulness or unawareness, unattentiveness or carelessness, you're not going to be able to purify your mind to be able to see the unwholesome qualities and the wholesome qualities. And if your mind is heedless, you're more likely to kill, steal, have sexual misconduct, and lie. So you're going to cause all kinds of harm. If you go talk to people who are in prison or in jail, they'll tell you that they're maybe there for murder, or they're there for stealing, or they're there for robbing somebody or something like this. But if you really penetrate into why they're in jail or why they're in prison, about 80% of the people will tell you it's because of drugs, that they would have never killed somebody if they weren't high on drugs, or they would have never stolen that car or stolen that money if they didn't need it for drugs or alcohol or some other thing. So by you practicing this particular precept closely, not only will your mind be more purified and you'll be able to make wiser decisions in life because your mind will be purified, but you're less likely to do all these other things that the Buddha is describing here as part of the natural law of Kamma. But then again, there's gray area here. You can look at something like marijuana. There's conclusive evidence that marijuana can be used for medical purposes. There's children who have seizures about 30 or 60 different times per day that they're having these seizures, and they take a little bit of CBD oil, which is oil from the marijuana plant, and they give it to them on their tongue, and they don't have seizures for like 6 months. And this is conclusive that this plant indeed has medical benefits, but it can also be used for a high, right? Depending on how you're using it. It can also be harmful. Like if you're smoking it, you could be damaging your lungs. So if you're using this for a pure medical purpose, you're probably looking for a plant that has a very high CBD. This is a version of the plant that is for medical purposes. There's another part of the plant called THC, which is producing the high in the mind. And typically you might be smoking it if you're trying to get high. So if you're going to use it for medical purposes, be sure you have a pure medical reason and that you're ingesting it in a way that doesn't cause harm to the physical body, which might be like an edible or like an oil or something like this. Whereas if you're smoking it, it's going to cause damage to the lungs. But be sure it's a pure medical purpose, because some people choose to use marijuana for things like stress or anxiety. But marijuana is not going to cure your stress or anxiety. What's actually causing the problems with stress and anxiety is what we call craving, desire, attachment. You can see this in the very beginning teaching of the Buddha, which I taught a few weeks ago, which is called the Four Noble Truths, where he helps you to see what's actually causing your stress and your anxiety. Because when you understand what's causing it, then you can actually eliminate it. But if you don't know what's causing your stress and anxiety, you might turn to something like marijuana, and this is kind of covering it up, but it's not actually solving it. You can actually solve it and eliminate it from the mind, where you never experience stress and you never experience anxiety. So you'll need to look at things like marijuana and figure out if you're using it in a way that's beneficial for you. We know that cigarettes don't have any medical purpose, and people have figured this out over time, and there's less and less people who are choosing to smoke cigarettes. There's all kinds of drugs and toxins in a cigarette, and this is why it produces harm in the lungs. People die and have cancer because of this particular practice. The Buddha is explaining to you the natural law of Kamma, of cause and effect, that if you take these substances, it's going to cause harm in your life. You also need to be aware of prescription medications, because some prescription medications can be abused. Of course, prescription medications can produce all kinds of benefits for us, but there's some prescription medications that you can get addicted to. So if your doctor is prescribing you a certain medication and you're unsure, you might need to do some research, or you might need to ask the doctor if there's another medication that is less addictive, or you might need to just hurry up and get off of that medication if there's no other medication available. So you're going to need to look at those kinds of things as well. You'll even need to look at caffeine. The caffeine can produce a high in the mind, and an individual can rely on caffeine to lift them up in the morning, and then you might crash at different times during the day. This is producing heedlessness in the mind. It's a legal substance, but it is a substance that's causing heedlessness. And what you'd like to do is get to this natural energy. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't be exhausted or tired at the end of your day. Now, if you get to the end of your day and you're exhausted or you're tired, this is because the mind is chasing after things. And in some cases, you get what you want. In some cases, you don't get what you want. And you can feel really exhausted, like you're carrying around bricks on your feet or bricks on your shoulders. At the end of your day, you might feel completely exhausted. And somebody might turn to caffeine thinking that that's going to lift them up and make them feel better, but then they're going to crash, or they might have trouble sleeping. So you can actually eliminate caffeine and see your mind more purely, and you can develop this natural energy in the mind and sustain your energy throughout your day. An enlightened being doesn't get exhausted or tired. They get sleepy where they need to get some sleep, but they don't get exhausted and tired. And they're not drinking caffeine because the caffeine is going to take their mind up and down and up and down. So you might decide at some point to look at that and eliminate it from your practice. You also need to be aware of sugar, that if you ingest sugar in excess, this can also produce a high, and then you can crash from that as well. So you're going to need to pay attention to sugar. And then the one here at the bottom, I don't know if you guys can read that or not. It says psychedelic substances. There's some people that will tell you psychedelic substances help you get to enlightenment. This is actually untrue, that the psychedelic substances promote the ability for the mind to be introspective and look inward, but the individual is relying on the substance to be able to do that. In order to get to enlightenment, you need to cultivate the natural ability to be introspective and to look inward at your own mind and to see what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, so that then you can purify the mind. So if you relied on a substance like a psychedelic substance to promote this, you're not going to be able to produce this naturally in the mind. So you can promote this and produce this naturally in your mind through training your mind. A psychedelic substance isn't going to be able to help you naturally cultivate that in the mind. So do you guys have any questions on this precept? You have a question? You can just grab the mic behind you. That way the people online can hear.
So I think alcohol is included here, right?
Yes, that's true. I'm not listing out everything.
Right.
I'm just kind of helping you to understand how to apply this precept. Even the Buddha, when he teaches, you can see that he teaches in a timeless way, because he couldn't envision like PCP and LSD. These are chemical-based substances. So he couldn't give like a complete list, because he taught 2,500 years ago, and things change over time. So he's teaching you in a way using language that is timeless, that can be applied throughout time. So here, the strong drink and sloth producing drugs, this includes alcohol. And I'm not listing every single substance. I'm just listing a few that you might be curious about and thinking about, and showing you how to apply it to those given situations. And then from the time that I die, there'll be future substances that are created or discovered. And if it's producing heedlessness, then you know it's causing harm to your own mind. But there might be things like marijuana that's in that gray area that you got to really look at closely. But if you understand this precept, you can apply it in all those situations.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Well, I'm not seeing any other questions online or either here. So what I'm going to do is just thank you guys for coming to learn the teachings of the Buddha, because you choosing to become dedicated and determined to learn the teachings, it's helping you, it's helping those close to you, and it's helping all of humanity. Because as you gain more and more wisdom, you'll be causing less and less harm in the world through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And that means you're going to be experiencing less harmful results for yourself. That means that people around you are going to be experiencing less harm, and the entire world is going to become more and more of a peaceful, kind, and gentler place to exist. So I always like to thank the students for choosing to learn and practice the teachings of the Buddha. As you guys would like to learn more, you're welcome to receive guidance, either personal guidance or learning in classes, I have all these books and classes and courses and retreats. There's online classes. There's classes here at the temple. If you go to our website, buddhadailywisdom.com, you'll see all those different options. You can even schedule appointments with me to meet privately, because it's one thing to learn in a class like this, but you might have personal challenges, either individually or in your relationships that you're challenged with, and you need personal guidance. And sometimes students like to meet privately in order to discuss those things. So you're always welcome to do that. And everything's available to you at no cost. You don't need to pay anything at all. I'm here to help you as you need help. So thank you all for joining for today's class. Perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Each Sunday, Wednesday, and Saturday we teach here and then online as well. So have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.